Goosebumps. Is it R.L. Stine's magnum opus? A series so well known that it's over 30 years old and still going today. It has scared children who have grown up to have their own scared children. But perhaps the series itself isn't Stine's best work, but a character. One that comes to the mind of people with even so little knowledge of the series. Slappy the Dummy. This evil ventriloquist dummy has rose above the pages to become a symbol in pop culture. Not just a symbol, but a source of fear. If you've ever read or watched the stories with Slappy in them, you may still be scared of dummies today. With over 15 books in his own saga and an entire book series bearing his name, Slappy is the face of Goosebumps itself. And it all started here, in Goosebumps number 7, Night of the Living Dummy. So the first cover here is of course the iconic 1993 Jacobus cover. I mentioned this before in Say Cheese and Die, but this cover used to scare the hell out of me. This and when they showed Slappy during the opening of the TV show, I had to close my eyes. I even had a nightmare about Slappy as a kid. How about I actually talk about the cover now? It's amazing, what can I say? It's one of the most simple covers in the whole series, but effective. Slappy's head at this angle with a gradient, just the way he stares at you. Ugh. Slappy's design will be pretty consistent for years, at least until Jacobus stopped drawing. His hair changed to a wavy black around Horrorland, and once the movie came out, he has the Jack Black design. Our tagline is, he walks, he stalks. The back tagline here is, he's no dummy. Next up is the UK cover from 1994, and this one actually has Mr. Wood on the cover because of his red hair. Or they made a big error trying to draw Slappy. Mr. Wood doesn't even wear a suit. Well, it's definitely one of them. And if you don't know who Mr. Wood is, I wouldn't be surprised. I didn't really want to spoil it right away, but this book is a Friday the 13th scenario. Slappy's on the cover, he's the most famous, but he isn't the main villain. Mr. Wood is. Now, Slappy is in this book, but isn't evil until the end. Now, of course, Mr. Wood will show up again, but that won't be for a long time. Here's the 2003 reprint. You can probably tell that Slappy is actually facing forward this time instead of at an angle. This is actually how the art was originally drawn, but just a little brighter now. Which one do you prefer? The old one or the new one? I've always thought that the angled look was a bit more threatening, but that's just me. The last standalone book here is the 2008 print. Like I said before, Dorman draws Slappy with black hair. I don't know why. Again, they had the chance to put Mr. Wood on the cover, but didn't. Slappy just sells more copies, I guess. It's also why I decided to just make the thumbnail Slappy. People love the guy. Like many of the early books we covered, the classic print has bonus features. This one teaches you how to be a ventriloquist, shares some of Slappy's best jokes, and the best segment of all, the splat stats. Slappy is overpowered. It makes sense. He's got like 16 books about him. Impossible to get rid of. Funny enough, his evil stat is one lower than that of the camera from Say Cheese and Die. My reasoning is that the curse on the camera just always does its worst, and Slappy at least has the ability to make choices that may not be evil, in a sense. For the first collection, here is the Monster Edition 2 from 1996. Slappy's dressed up like a teacher, and you might notice that it tells you to touch Slappy's mouth if you dare. Now, if the camera can pick it up, the eyes light up. I was definitely surprised it worked when I got it. This collection has all 3 of the original Living Dummy books. Speaking of that, the next collection also contains all 3 Living Dummy books. This is the Living Dummy collection from 2005. It's got Slappy peeping through the cover, with a fake leather texturing. There's not much else to say about it, so let's move on. I actually want to bring up one more collection that a wonderful commenter mentioned. Now, I only show off books that I own, but this is worth mentioning. In the UK, 3-book collections existed for most of the original series. A direct answer to my concerns with the US only having the hair-raising and vanishing collections that did this? Well, Night of the Living Dummy is in Collection 2. The titles in this collection may seem confusing, because Say Cheese and Die was actually Book 2 in the UK, and Monster Blood was Book 5. Even with that context, all of the Monster Blood books aren't here, because those 3 books were in a separate collection, and the last 4 books were never collected. Sorry for the front-loaded information, but unless I feel like wasting more money, which is possible, I probably won't be bringing these up again. Thrift stores even charge a decent chunk just for a copy in poor condition. The last book here is not a collection. Well, not in our traditional sense. This is Slappy's Tales of Horror. It collects 3 previous graphic novel adaptations for a few other books, but most importantly, the adaptation of Night of the Living Dummy. This is the only adaptation of it, by the way. If you saw my Curse of the Mummy's Tomb video, you knew this was coming, but this is the second book where the sequel has an episode, but the first does not. When you think about the fact that Slappy isn't the main villain, that's probably why. Curse of the Mummy's Tomb, I have no idea. Like any adaptation, I'll be covering it after the book summary, so let's get to it. Lindy and Chris Powell are twin sisters that compete at everything, even at blowing bubblegum. They're nearly identical. The only difference between them is how they style their hair. They argue with each other as their mom wishes they would get along better, until their dog starts barking. And this dog is my current winner for worst Goosebumps dog name yet. Barky. Yes, because he barks a lot. Mom practically forces them to go play outside while she runs to the store, so they do just that. They were going to ride their bikes, but the house next door is so interesting. It hasn't been built yet, but the walls are up. They love walking around the foundation when the workers aren't there. Definitely not something I've ever done, but seems fun enough. They pass through the makeshift door, and Lindy makes sure to warn Chris about the nails scattered all over the floor. She might get lockjaw and die. Hey, if these kids didn't get the vaccine, that's their parents' fault. Well, they take a look around until they hear footsteps in the house. They both sprint outside, looking back to see a squirrel? How anticlimactic. Chris loses Lindy for a second until she finds her at a nearby dumpster. Something's inside. Arms and legs? A head? Oh my god! So it's not actually a dead body, but it is a dummy. He's got brown hair, blue eyes, and big red lips. He's got this gray suit with a collar that isn't actually connected to his shirt because the entire torso is painted white. Other than a small chip in his lower lip, he's practically untouched. Lindsay decides that he's cute, so she's gonna keep him. She even names him Slappy, for some reason. I feel like I remember Slappy having a name tag in one of the future books, but his backstory is going to change a lot until his most recent version. So Lindy's having fun acting like Slappy, and Chris's jealousy is definitely showing. If one of them has something, the other one has to have it too. I had the same deal with my cousin back when new Pokemon games would come out for the DS, but things have changed. Walking down the street, they encounter Amy and Ben Marshall, these two little kids that they babysit sometimes. The kids have a grand old time with Slappy as Chris sits on the curb sulking. Lindy is so happy that Slappy makes Chris so jealous. Definitely keeping him. But is there something more lifelike behind those wooden eyes? It's been a week since they found Slappy, and the family's eating dinner when Lindy says that the Marshalls are going to pay her to perform at Amy's birthday party. $20! Sweet! Chris is still being rude because Lindy's been practicing this whole week. That is, until Lindy decides to bring Slappy to school one day. Chris watches Lindy from a distance expecting the most embarrassing flop, but the other students actually love it. Even Robbie Martin, the boy Chris has been crushing on for 2 years. You know, the most unrealistic thing about this book is how everyone seems to think that Slappy is so hilarious. Maybe Lindy really is that good. The only person I know who popularized ventriloquism in the modern age is Jeff Dunham, and even his shit isn't funny. Well, Chris takes a moment to think and realizes, I must become a ventriloquist too. She goes home and mopes while Mom and Dad are on the couch. She asks if she can have her own dummy too, which sparks an argument between the two girls. You really feel bad for Lindy here. Chris wants to copy her, and Lindy rightfully points out that Chris was belittling her all week and changed her mind when she learned he could make money. Mom and Dad says the dummies are too expensive, so maybe they could just share Slappy until one of them gets bored. This is a great idea for Chris, but when she reaches out to take Slappy, he slaps her in the face. Lindy swears that Slappy did it, but enough berating from Chris and Dad make her apologize, and she gives Slappy to Chris. Mom calls Lindy a baby. They just never understand how these kids feel, man. Lindy tells Chris how to operate Slappy as she thinks about how she just wants one thing that belongs to her alone. Later at night, Chris has a nightmare she doesn't clearly remember, but she wakes up at 3 a.m. You know, a lot of these books have midnight events around 3 a.m. I know it's the witching hour and all, but it just makes me think of those 3 a.m. challenge videos people used to make. He literally has a fat ass, and I want to smack it! Chris feels something staring at her. In the corner of the room, sitting on a chair, is Slappy. Head tilted to the right and bathed in moonlight, he stares right at her. She silently gets out of bed and touches him. She hears a noise and thinks it's Slappy laughing at her. No way. She's scared, but she shouldn't be. She moves Slappy's head over and heads back to bed. That is, until Slappy grabs her wrist. Chris cries out, but when she turns around, it was Lindy that grabbed her. She tries to act like she wasn't scared, but Lindy teases her about it. She decides to go back to bed, and Lindy puts Slappy back in his old position. Even though the angle of the light has changed, she still feels his eyes staring at her, and with that creepy smile too. She finally gets back to sleep and has another nightmare. Something is chasing her, but she can't remember what. Let me just say, Chris getting up to move Slappy away is extremely relatable. I would not be caught dead having a dummy like Slappy in my house, let alone having him look at me while I'm sleeping. I used to have to turn the cover of this book around when it was in my house. Even now you know the stuff isn't real, but a creepy enough thing stares at you and you just want it to go away. After chorus on Monday, both girls head home and Mom and Dad are making meatloaf, another staple of American cuisine. After mentioning how sad it is to learn Russian and Yugoslavian songs in chorus, Chris heads up to her room and sees not just Slappy, but another dummy. They're holding hands too. How cute. Dad comes into the room to ask if Chris likes the new dummy. He got it at a pawn shop nearby for cheap. Appearance-wise, he looks a lot like Slappy, except he has bright red hair. For clothing, this dummy has a red and green flannel shirt, jeans, and white sneakers. Chris loves it and runs downstairs telling everyone to meet Mr. Wood. Of course, another argument between the girls begins. Chris says she'll be better than Lindy, Lindy calling her a copycat, you get the drill by now. So the next afternoon, Chris is trying on all her favorite junk jewelry when her friend Cody Matthews shows up. Chris called him over to practice her act. She tells him a few jokes such as, "Mr. Wood, why are you standing in front of the mirror with your eyes closed?" "Well, I wanted to see what I look like when I'm asleep." She asks Cody after every single joke if they're funny, and he doesn't laugh at any of them. He asks why she's even doing this, and when Chris says that it's fun, he passes his insight check. Chris says that she just wants to prove that she's better than Lindy. Cody just says, "You two are weird, see you in school," and leaves. Later at night, Chris is heading to bed while Lindy brushes her teeth. Just when Lindy gets into the room, she mentions that she was at her friend Alice's house with Slappy. Everyone there laughed their asses off, and they love her and Slappy's rap routine? I don't want to ever hear that. Lindy asks if Chris is getting better with Mr. Wood. It doesn't seem backhanded, but Chris takes it that way. She lies and says that Cody laughs so hard that they should be on TV. Lindy finds it hard to believe because Cody doesn't really laugh at anything. But she accepts it and says that she can't wait to see Chris perform. Mom wakes them up in the morning, but something's off. Mr. Wood is gone. Chris looks around angrily asking Lindy where she put him, until she sees him standing in the doorway. He's wearing the formal clothes that Chris was supposed to wear to school today, and he's not really standing, just propped up by the doorknob. The clothes are all wrinkled now, and Lindy swears she didn't do anything. If they didn't do it, who did? Saturday afternoon, Lindy, Alice, Cody, and Chris are all outside as Chris practices with Mr. Wood. Lindy keeps interrupting with suggestions, and nobody's really laughing at anything. I suppose the novelty of Slappy wore off at school because Alice mentions that the whole school thinks that both of the girls are weird. Lindy doesn't care, though. She's about to make bank at that birthday party soon. Chris says she can't find any good joke books, and Lindy defiantly says that she comes up with her own. To be honest, that's probably the biggest reason why Chris sucks so bad at this. She probably reads from Jokes for Minecrafters. Lindy grabs Mr. Wood to try and give Chris some tips, but when Chris asks for Lindy to give him back, "You're a jerk. You're a stupid jerk. I'm an NYU film school graduate, sucker!" Lindy, how could you be so rude? But she can't stop him. Mr. Wood's speaking on his own. Lindy has to use all of her might to pull Mr. Wood away from Chris's face. Chris actually seems to believe that Mr. Wood did it himself and tries to talk to Lindy, but she's too freaked out. Lindy hands Mr. Wood back to Chris and realizes she's late for the party. Unfortunately, we don't actually see any of Lindy's jokes because we skip forward to dinner time while Chris is on the swing. Lindy talks about how great her and Slappy were. Chris is actually pretty nice, but Lindy just keeps going on about how much people love the routine, even that rap segment that can't possibly be good. Lindy even made $5 extra. Not only that, but another neighbor is going to pay her $30 for her daughter's party next week. She's rich. She takes a break from gloating to ask what Chris was doing. After the chaos from earlier, Chris put Mr. Wood back upstairs and went to the mall. The great thing is that she ran into Mrs. Berman there, the music teacher. She actually wants Chris to perform at the spring concert. Lindy's jealousy is clear. At dinner, Chris eats in silence as Mom gasses Lindy up. She even tells Chris that she should watch Lindy to pick up some tips. That hurts. After all that, the girls head upstairs to a horrifying scene. Slappy's dangling from the chair upside down, with his shoes flung across the room. Not only that, but Mr. Wood is strangling him. Lindy's horrified, and she asks if Chris was responsible, which she denies immediately. Lindy seems to accept this, but mutters that Chris's dummy is evil. I gotta give Lindy and Chris this. At least for now, I'm glad they both believe each other. From what I remember, most of these living dummy books are gonna be the whole something goes bad, sibling or parent blames the main character, but it was Slappy messing around. So I'm glad that at least in this first one, Lindy can realize that Chris is just as confused as she is. They both decide they should tell Mom, and knowing what I just said, I doubt it'll go well. It mentions that Mom is reading a Stephen King book, so she should be familiar with some weird supernatural shit. I'll give you a moment to guess what happens. Yeah, she immediately shuts them down. She doesn't even let them explain before yelling at them to stop fighting. Then she turns off the bed lamp and says, "Good night." Well, that went swimmingly. Chris decides she's going to put Mr. Wood in the closet for tonight. She can't believe that she's scared of a dummy. Yeah, nah, I would have never gotten one in the first place, so the girls head to sleep, and when Chris wakes up, she glances over to the chair. Slappy's sitting right there, and so is Mr. Wood. 2 days go by without another incident, and Chris is practicing for the concert. That is until Lindy comes upstairs with great news. A woman from a news channel was at Amy's party. She thinks that Lindy's good enough to go on talent search. She's going to be on TV. Lindy goes to tell Mom, and Chris is so pissed she just slams Mr. Wood on the floor. Of course, Mr. Wood is fine, but his eyes seem to have an unforgiving look to them. At night, Lindy's woken up by the sound of footsteps. She asks if it's Chris, and yes, it is. She's just going down to get some water. So Lindy goes back to bed. Until Chris starts screaming. Lindy practically jumps downstairs and finds a horrific scene. The fridge is wide open and everything inside is spilled out onto the floor. All of Chris's precious junk jewelry is scattered there too. Chris stands in the corner staring in horror as Mr. Wood sits in the middle of it all. Lindy's first concern is if Chris is okay. Chris can barely speak, she's so scared. Did Mr. Wood do this? Lindy starts to speak, but Mom shows up in the kitchen. Just take a wild guess what's gonna happen. You both swear you didn't do it, right? Then you both lose your dummies. One of you is lying. I can't believe it. So, looking for a way to keep the dummies, the girls suggest they clean the kitchen and waste their allowance replacing everything from the fridge. It works. As long as these girls make the kitchen spotless by the morning, they can keep their dummies. This mom is heartless. Well, the girls finally get the place cleaned and head up to bed after 3 in the morning. Chris throws Mr. Wood in the closet and slams it shut. These girls can finally go to bed, but then a voice from the closet seems to cry out, "Let me out!" Chris shoots up out of bed. She asks Lindy if she hears it, but she's confused. Chris is so scared at this point she's stuttering, but Lindy knows exactly who's doing it. Who? I have. Lindy admits that she's been doing it the whole time. Like a supervillain, she reveals her whole plan of how she did all of this just for the fun of scaring Chris. Ever since Chris got Mr. Wood, she was so tired of Chris being a copycat that she did all of this just to spite her. She can't believe Chris was so stupid. Chris needs to get back at her for this, but how? My allegiance has definitely shifted over the course of this book. I was definitely on Lindy's side when it started, but this really crosses a line. I'm sure whatever Chris has planned will be very calm, and Mr. Wood will never do any more strange things. Chris is walking home with Cody, and he's sympathetic. He asks if she told her mom about Lindy's stunt, but since the kitchen, she banned them from mentioning the dummies. Not only that, but she told Dad, and they're banned from telling him too. When Chris gets home, she decides it's the best time to practice, as no one else is home. Mr. Wood's shirt comes unbuttoned, and Chris notices a little slip of paper in the shirt pocket. How come she's never seen it before? There's a single sentence written on it in a language she doesn't understand, which she decides to read out loud for some reason. Karu Mario Dona Loma Molonu Karano. Chris looks down and it looks like Mr. Wood just blinked? No, that can't be right. Time to practice. After dinner, Dad tells the girls to come downstairs. The Millers, their old neighbors, are over for coffee, and Dad thinks it's a great idea for the girls to put on a quick show for them. The old couple asks the girls if they know who Bergen and McCarthy are, an actual ventriloquist who is probably the face of the art form for most of the 1900s. Of course, the girls don't know him. They're performing in the sweet spot of Bergen being dead and Jeff Dunham not being popular. So Lindy goes first, and she's a tough act to follow. Even Chris has to admit that she's really good. It's Chris's turn, and this part is actually so funny to me. Mr. Wood starts insulting the Millers like mad. Stuff about dentures, yellow teeth, bad breath, being ugly, some casual stuff. What's funny is it starts by Mrs. Miller saying that he's a nice-looking dummy, and Mr. Wood saying, "You're a nice dummy too." That's the line that makes everyone gasp. I love the part where Mr. Miller says, "It's just crude insults." Chris knows she isn't doing this, but she doesn't know what to say, so she just says sorry and runs upstairs crying. Lindy follows her upstairs and she just rolls her eyes. Chris swears she didn't do it, but Lindy assumes she's just copying her master plan from before. Despite her cries, Lindy happily says that Mom and Dad might cancel her concert performance and heads downstairs. We cut straight ahead to the concert, and Chris is nervous. You know there's a lot of time jumps in this book. She tells Mr. Wood no more insults tonight, and he actually blinks at her. She didn't do that. Maybe she should just say she's sick and not do this. Mrs. Berman, the music teacher, gives her some reassuring words. It'll be fine. It is not fine. Chris hesitates and Mrs. Berman goes on stage to ask if she needs help. That's when the insults start. About 7 or so fat jokes, really. Mrs. Berman demands she apologize, and that's when Mr. Wood says, "Apologize for this." Will Mr. Wood A. Get up and attack Mrs. Berman, B. Say a censored curse word, or C. Puke a green liquid with a force and smell so strong that the entire auditorium has to be evacuated? Yes, if you said C, you were right. Mr. Wood starts vomiting all over the place and everyone has to leave. Chris is shoved backstage and Mrs. Berman says that if she gets her way, Chris will be suspended forever. Dad makes Chris put Mr. Wood into the closet. He says that he'll be taking him back to the pawn shop and he's not getting moved till then. She tries to explain, but no. The parents are just too mad today. It'll have to wait. Chris even tries to tell Lindy, but she agrees with Dad. Chris can't sleep at night. It's 1:20 a.m., and the memories of the concert are keeping her up. She starts to hear what sounds like footsteps and the closet door swings open. She moves as quietly as possible as the steps move towards the bedroom door. When she finally finds the figure in the hallway, she turns it around to see Mr. Wood grinning right at her. Mr. Wood actually hisses at her. This can't be happening. You're a dummy. So are you. Chris grabs his shoulders, still in disbelief. Let me go, now! The fight has begun. Mr. Wood is surprisingly strong. They roll down a few steps as Chris keeps holding on. He punches her in the stomach and uses that moment to run, but she trips him. She dives on top of him, pinning him under her weight. Lindy appears and Chris yells at her to get Mom and Dad. He's alive! She's unconvinced, though, and tells Chris she's just having a nightmare. Mr. Wood goes limp, so Chris lightens up. Just as she does, though, Mr. Wood pries himself out from under her and starts moving down the stairs. Lindy screams and runs to get their parents. Getting to her feet, Chris manages to pin Mr. Wood down by planting her foot into his back. Mom and Dad finally reach the stairs. Look! Look at what? Again, Mr. Wood has gone limp under Chris's foot. Dad even goes to the extent of saying that Chris might need a doctor. Even with Lindy's support, the parents think this is some kind of sick joke and yell at them to get to their room. When they leave, Lindy stays and Mr. Wood goes active again. He says that they're going to be his slaves now. Chris asks how he's even alive, and of course, it's because she read the ancient words on that slip of paper. She somehow gets the idea that reading the words again will put him back to sleep. Still in Woods' pocket, Chris pries it out while he protests. He tries to grab it back, but she reads the words. Karu Mario Dona Loma Molonu Karano. Those are the words that brought him to life, you idiot. It doesn't work. Lindy, let's kill the dummy. Chris tells her to pull his head off, all the while Mr. Wood is taunting them with threats of slavery and violence. No matter what, they can't get his head off. He even bites Chris's arm with his wooden jaw. They'll just have to cut it off. Chris is going to drag him to their room, and Lindy can use her scissors to cut it off. They try cutting with the scissors, then sawing, but it doesn't work. Mr. Wood says they're going to do his bidding, and if they don't, he'll start hurting the people they love. They want to lock him in the closet, but they know the closet doesn't have a lock on it. Mr. Wood mentions his powers, and it's clear that the strange vomit was one of those, so for now, he's probably just playing around with them, but he's getting tired of it. Lindy has an idea, though, and grabs a suitcase in her room. Mr. Wood manages to escape Chris and exclaims that they will be his slaves. Both girls dive at once, grabbing Mr. Wood and forcing his body into the suitcase. He promises that someone will die for this. As they shove the suitcase into the closet, now what? We'll bury him in dirt. Next door at the new house, there's a mound of dirt. Chris decides they should bury the suitcase there. Lindy can't really object. It's past 3 in the morning and she's got no other ideas. She wants to tell Mom and Dad, but Chris knows they won't believe him. Lindy actually apologizes for getting them into ventriloquism at all. And she can't even look at Slappy anymore, but that's not important right now. The girls get dressed and head outside. As Mr. Wood tells them to let him out, they ignore him and start digging. After that business, Lindy's dead tired, but Chris is wired. Chris tries to talk about the situation, but Lindy passes out. Chris eventually falls asleep too, only to be woken up in the morning by steamrollers next door. Even with only 5 hours of sleep, she's refreshed and excited that those rollers might have run over that suitcase. Lindy's still asleep, so she heads downstairs to see Mom is angry? I wonder why. Oh, it's Mr. Wood, covered in dirt and sitting on the kitchen counter. As Mom turns away in anger, Mr. Wood gives an evil wink. Dad comes downstairs and asks Mom if she's ready. They're heading to the garden store before it rains outside. Chris doesn't want them to leave. What about taking Mr. Wood back to the pawn shop? Well, that's not till Monday, and it's Saturday. Unable to protest because they obviously won't believe her, Chris is now left alone in the kitchen with a killer dummy. Barky comes in and licks the floor under Mr. Wood. Lindy also comes downstairs to notice Mr. Wood herself. Is there any way to get rid of this dummy? Mr. Wood tells them that he has to prove that he's serious and squeezes his hands around Barky's neck. The dog must die now. Both girls lunge towards Mr. Wood, desperately trying to help the poor dog. Chris finally manages to pry his hands apart and he lands a rough chop on her forehead. Lindy's still holding onto his legs and she tells Chris to grab his arms again. She misses and Mr. Wood bites her wrist. Lindy lifts Mr. Wood up by his legs and slams him into the floor, giving Chris the chance to grab his arms again. Ideas. Aha! The steamrollers! They run outside as the thunder starts rolling in, sprinting towards the steamrollers. That's when they notice Barky run past them right into the path of them. No! The girls let go of Mr. Wood to get Barky, who playfully runs away like a game of tag. Mr. Wood triumphantly yells that he's free, and he begins to run away. He never saw the second steamroller. The impact shakes the ground, and a green sulfurous gas seeps out in the shape of a mushroom cloud. The roller driver gets out thinking he killed a kid, but the girls let him know it was just a dummy. The girls are so happy to be free from Mr. Wood, but after being drenched in the rain, they need to change their clothes. Heading back upstairs, the girls gasp. The window's open. Chris hurries to close it, but Slappy grabs her hand. Hey, slave, is that other guy gone? I thought he'd never leave. Wow, I really enjoyed that. Other than the overuse of the parents never believe kids thing, it was great. That said, I would have to assume this trope will be used a lot for the rest of the Living Dummy books. Anything inanimate that can come to life when it wants to is bound to use it. Look at Child's Play, Poltergeist, Annabelle, all horror movies with a similar thing happening. Obviously, Slappy is irrelevant until the end of the book, but Mr. Wood is still a great villain. His traits are basically the same as Slappy from what I can remember. They both want kids to be their slaves for some reason. Obviously, Slappy likes to tell more jokes. Mr. Wood was just rude. That exorcist vomiting scene? What the hell? He constantly mentions having powers, but that's all he ever does. Unfortunately for Mr. Wood, he's never appeared again for 24 years. Of course, he's dead, but anything's possible, right? Like every other Goosebumps book, Night of the Living Dummy has plenty of inspirations. Stein himself has stated that both Pinocchio and his own experience scaring his brother with a dummy inspired the story. The concept of an evil dummy isn't even new, either. 2 episodes of The Twilight Zone deal with ventriloquism, and the show is a consistent source of possible inspiration. Both The Dummy and Caesar and Me deal with evil dummies. The Great Gabbo, Dead of Night, Magic, all films with either an evil ventriloquist or an evil dummy that messes with one. I was honestly surprised researching this just how much horror media there was related to dummies before this, but seriously, look at them. I don't even know if I could sleep in the same room as one now. If only we got a television episode of this, but at least we have a graphic novel. Let's check it out. The story begins with a narration from Slappy, which he did for every previous story in this same book. You'll notice that Mr. Wood's body is roasting over the fire, which doesn't really make sense, but whatever. The girls are not actually blonde in this version. Lindy has long brown hair and Chris has short green hair. The length of their hair is the same as the book, but Lindy's supposed to have hers in a ponytail. I would show all of the pages I go over for this, but for fear of any copyright shenanigans, I'll only show what's necessary for changes. Lindy finds Slappy and he's clearly different from how he is in the book. Because it's 2015 when this came out, he has his more Brandon Dorman style with black hair. The book even gives him red eyes for this panel to make it seem like he's evil, but he shouldn't even be alive yet. We get past the school, the scene where the girls argue, and get to when Mr. Wood appears. This is when I noticed that Dad wasn't going to be in the story at all. Early in the book, Dad is away on a job, so I assumed that was why he wasn't here, but Mom actually says she bought Mr. Wood, completely replacing Dad's role. Mr. Wood looks almost completely different too. He might still be wearing jeans, and those are definitely sneakers, but his Freddy Krueger sweater is replaced with a boring V-neck. His hair is a bit spiky too when it's supposed to be the same style as Slappy. Most of the graphic novel's pretty accurate so far, other than small details they left out, like Slappy's shoes not being removed in the first incident. Mom's on the computer instead of reading Stephen King when Chris brings up Mr. Wood being alive. The story is the same until the concert, where Chris reads the ancient words. Obviously, in the book, she read them during practice, so that scene and the scene with the Millers, the old couple, is gone. Mr. Wood pukes everywhere, and we get to the part where Mr. Wood actually goes alive. Except, instead of fighting on the stairs and alerting Mom and Dad, he shows himself to both girls right away, and they don't try to cut his head off. I noticed the second time around that the ancient words aren't spelled right. The last word, Carano, is spelled Carraro, and I have no idea why this even happened. They bury Mr. Wood next door, and in the morning both of them go down at the same time. Mom's already left instead of leaving with Dad, and Mr. Wood still strangles Barky, but he's orange instead of a black terrier. When Mr. Wood gets crushed by the roller, it's just his head instead of rolling onto his back. And finally, when the girls go back upstairs, Slappy's already looking out the window instead of grabbing Chris's arm. Now, I read that a little fast, so I'm sorry about that, but I didn't really expect the story to be so accurate. Of course, you could tell that most of the differences I pointed out were small, like the reasonable hair color difference to make it easier to tell the girls apart, and the unreasonable, like the ancient words being spelled wrong. As far as I know, and even on the wiki, the words have never changed spelling, so how an error like this got through is beyond me. What I didn't mention was the art, which I'm not really a fan of. It's perfectly serviceable, it's a kid's book after all, but even some of the stories in this same book have vivid and terrifying art. This one doesn't really make Mr. Wood or Slappy intimidating at all. It reminds me of when I first saw the graphic novel version of Plush Trap, though at least that one has some scary artwork. I don't mean to shit on this artist, he draws better than I ever could. He's even recently drawn this book called Unicorn Boy, which seems pretty good. In the intermission, I mentioned the past and the works that inspired Night of the Living Dummy. But what about the aftermath? Well, Slappy has become an icon, the face of Goosebumps himself. Poor Curly, the prior mascot, got thrown to the trash, relegated to special covers of the movie soundtrack vinyl. After the success of Goosebumps, the only real ventriloquist horror film I can think of is Dead Silence. And the dummy in that movie looks a lot like Slappy. That can't be a coincidence. The book left a nice impression, so will Slappy's antics in the sequels be an exciting journey, or a constant slog? We'll just have to see. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed, please like and subscribe. It makes my day to see people enjoy this hyperfixation of mine, so I'll see you in 2 weeks for the next book, The Girl Who Cried Monster.